Hello, and thank you for watching this presentation entitled Decoding Shakespeare's First Folio, It's a Numbers Game, Part 1. My name is Eric Luskow, and today is March 7th, 2024. I'll be approaching the First Folio from an Oxfordian perspective, i.e. that Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, wrote the plays and also the poems historically attributed to the man from Stratford, and also from the perspective that Hemmings and Condell were not the editors. If you're not familiar with the Shakespeare authorship question and the Oxfordian theory, I would highly recommend you visit the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship website, shakespeareoxfordfellowship.org. I'll also be touching occasionally upon the connection between the First Folio and the Spanish Match, but of course that's not a main topic of this video. The primary sources I'll be using are the First Folio itself, both the version made available on the Library of Congress website and the printed Norton facsimile second edition, Alexander Waugh's extraordinary videos on YouTube, and the printing and proofreading of the First Folio of Shakespeare, volumes 1 and 2 by Charlton Hinman. Here also is a good opportunity to recognize Charlotte Armstrong as the first known person to parse Johnson's First Folio epigram into iambs to reveal the message, "Vere had his wit, Vere writ his book," in her 1969 novel, 7 Seats to the Moon. So here's our To the Reader epigram written by Ben Jonson. For more information, see Alexander Waugh's Ben Jonson videos on YouTube. Waugh demonstrated that using the 11 letters of the title To the Reader and the 9 letters of the name Johnson to count through the 40 metrical feet, we can find Vere had his wit, Vere writ his book. I would only add that we can also get the 11 from the geometric values of Johnson's initials, B equals 2 and I equals 9, to get the 11. Also note that Jonson famously tells us to ignore the engraving and find the author in the book. I know for many people watching that this preliminary information is already well known, so please bear with me. We're almost to what I think is new and fascinating information. So here's Alexander Waugh's YouTube channel for your reference. Now, for a quick look at gematria. Understanding gematria and how it was used to connect people to God with letters and numbers is critical to my arguments in this video. I'm using the Elizabethan 24-letter alphabet, which includes the letter W. Ron Roefel has several informative videos that use the Latin 23-letter alphabet lacking the W. His results and mine are not mutually exclusive unless X, Y, or Z, which all shift one number lower in the Latin version, are used. Gematria has a sometimes deserved, sometimes undeserved reputation for being unreliable as evidence. The key to its use, in my opinion, is to keep it as simple as possible. Gematria can be equal parts astounding and confounding. Yet we know the Elizabethans, particularly the ones we're concerned with here, were clearly obsessed with it. So back to the chart where we see a number assigned to each of the 24 letters of the Elizabethan alphabet. The 2 letters missing from our modern English alphabet are J and U, which respectively were interchangeable with I and V. So for example, Ben Jonson, J-O-N-S-O-N, is spelled I-O-N-S-O-N. Now, on the principal actors page, from the preliminary folio pages, notice in the subtitle the word original is italicized. Ben Jonson, I believe, encoded the geometric value of his initials in the italicized word original, which, as you can see, has a geometric value of 92. 9 equals I, 2 equals B. We'll look more closely at geometric values in a moment, and then later we'll also return to the principal actors page. Back to Waugh for a minute. So he demonstrates in his videos that Edward de Vere embedded his geometric numbers 17 and 14 into his unique signature, and also that de Vere encoded his numbers into the name William Shakespeare, VV as 40, and then Illiam Shakespeare, 17 letters. The key here is that de Vere uses double V, 20 times 2 equals 40, rather than the 21 assigned to W in normal Elizabethan gematria. This is extremely important. And as well also shows there's documentary evidence of De Vere referring to himself as Double V. So not coincidentally, the principal actors page is on the 17th overall page of the folio, counting from the blank recto page preceding Johnson's to the reader epigram, which is on the verso page. Also not coincidentally, counting from the same blank recto page to the blank verso page after the final recto page of Cymbeline, the first folio is 908 pages long. 9 plus 0 plus 8 equals 17, or 9 plus 8 equals 17, surrounding an O for Oxford. Take your pick or take both. Our editors were enamored with double meanings. The Norton facsimile helpfully uses this overall pagination while also preserving the original pagination of the folio text, so you don't need to count yourself. It was relatively easy for our editors to land on 908. There are blank pages and filler pages throughout the book. Additionally, we have 36 plays with 2 columns per page and 66 lines per column. And now's a good time to note the Christian significance of the number 369. At a very high level, 3 represents Christ, 6 the Holy Spirit, and 9 God. 369 is a magical mystical number, is also used in non-Christian contexts, including strictly mathematical scenarios, but we'll limit ourselves here to a Christian interpretation as the folio is demonstrably connected to the Spanish match, first identified by Peter Dixon, wherein James I attempted to unify England and Spain through the marriage of his son Charles to the Spanish Infanta. I would highly recommend the first folio, A Shakespearean Enigma, edited by Roger Strittmatter, for an in-depth look at how the folio and the Spanish match were intertwined. I believe the decision to include 36 plays was directly related to the religious implications of the Spanish match, with 3 and 6, and then add the 3 and the 6 to get the 9. Now you've got 369. Connecting De Vere and his works to God was also obviously fundamental to this magical, religiously symbolic number of 369. So back to Gematria. Apologies if it seems too much like work, but I think I can make it easier to see the numbers games our editors are playing. So there are 3 values I would like to focus on. The first 3 letters I would like to focus on. The first is I. It obviously has an alphabetic value. It has a geometric value of 9, and as we have seen, but can also be used for the number 1. In the folio and in countless other printed matter, capital I can be the number 1. We're used to seeing it in Roman numerals, and even in Hinman's book, circa 1968, capital I is used as the number 1. The second letter I'm focused on is O. Again, it has its alphabetic value, it has its geometric value of 14, and it has the numeric value of 0. It's still commonly used when we say years, for example, 1604, or phone numbers, 303, 404, etc. The third letter, Z, again, has its alphabetic value, its geometric value of 24, and though archaic, it has a numeric value of 2. In the 17th century and earlier, it was a manuscript typographic substitute for the number 2. Z is the least obvious key, but once deciphered, the geometric games in the folio become clearly evident. So here are some examples. Over in the top right, you can see the number 12, where the 2 is essentially a Z. Here in the lower right, you can see the Z as a 2. Across it, you read 3, 5, and then 2. Here's a close-up of that. Again, over to the right, that is a 2, not a letter Z. And final example has many of the Z as 2. You can see 28, 26, 29, 27, 23 along the top, and then similar numbers along the bottom. So we've got letters I, O, Z, the numbers 102, geometric numbers 9, 14, 24, respectively. 3 keys and 3 potential values. So looking at the catalog page now, what we would today call a table of contents page, we can see that the comedies, histories, and tragedies are separately paginated, which gives our editors additional latitude to unleash their thematic ingeniousness. To start, I'll focus only on the comedies and their paginations, recalling that Johnson in his To the Reader epigram has explicitly told us to ignore the poorly executed engraving and instead find the author in the book. Let's take a quick look at a couple of examples. So Love's Labour's Lost begins on page 122, which can be converted to IZZ, which has a geometric value of 57. 9 plus 24 plus 24 equals 57, which is the total of de Vere's geometric numbers 40 plus 17. Love's Labour's Lost is a crucial play in the identification of the author, certainly from an Oxfordian perspective. And then we have Merchant of Venice beginning on page 163 and converting the 1 to I and then back to geometric 9. We have 963 as the starting page for a play about a Jewish merchant, Old Testament vengeance, and Christian mercy. Interesting, but could just be coincidences, right? So I'll put the page numbers into a spreadsheet to make them easier to see. So here I've separated the page numbers into 3 columns, then converted the I's, O's, and Z's to their geometric value, and the total of the right-hand column is 122, which then converts to IZZ, which converts to 57. But please don't shoot the messenger. This is how gematria works. So here, in a non-geometric example, we've got the left column 14, middle column 47, right column 48, which total up to 109. Divide 109 by our significant number 3, and you'll get 36.333 to infinity. So essentially, our editors connected de Vere to God in the catalog pagination of the comedy section. And we also get a Spanish match encryption as well. Later, we'll see that Julius Caesar starts on page 109, and I'll only go as far here to draw attention to the initials shared by Christ and Caesar, the betrayal of both by a trusted friend, and the crucifixion of Christ by a later Caesar. The Christ-Caesar parallels are historically interesting, but not a subject to pursue here. Later, we'll also see additional instances of the number 109. So this slide has 3 instances of the comedy's pagination combined into one. I've separated them with black borders to make the slide easier to digest and color-coded the numerous 17s identified. But there is, of course, a catch to the comedy's pagination. Our editors cheated. The Winter's Tale actually begins on page 277. Page 304, which is an unnumbered verso with recto page 303 being the last page of the Winter's Tale, is blank. In my opinion, this cannot be a compositor error. The catalog page was printed near the end of the first folio printing process as laid out in Hemmings' book, so blaming a compositor really does not hold up under scrutiny. It's also rather clumsy, as though the editors were trying to make it appear that amateurs were editing the book, while our real editors were simultaneously layering in an excess of geometric pyrotechnics underneath. Before we leave the Winter's Tale, here's one more geometric exercise. In the title, The Winter's Tale, we have the initials E and O derived from the geometric values of the letters T, H, and E in green. Then we've got the double V geometric value of 40 in yellow. Then the geometric value of inters converted twice to reach 17 in orange, and then the geometric value of tail totaling 36. So I can almost hear the howls over the internet from the Stratfordians. I just converted the word the to E and O. Again, this is how gematria works. It's not cut and dried mathematics. It's a creative way to connect letters and numbers to people and God. Just as we can interpret the attempts of documenting alchemy from this time period without actually believing alchemy works, we can interpret gematria. So here, let's take a moment to look at Charlton Hinman's book and his editorship of the Norton Facsimile First Edition. I don't wish to set him up as a straw man. The effort that went into his 2-volume, 1,000-plus page bibliography is monumental and includes much useful information and insightful commentary. But his dismissal of pagination errors on the catalog page and throughout the folio is highly questionable. He dismisses the Winter's Tale starting page anomaly as a simple compositor error and is equally dismissive of the pagination anomalies in the plays themselves. I'll cover these in depth later, but just as an example, the very first play, The Tempest, page 1, went through 4 revisions. The first state, the very first page of The Tempest went through 4 revisions. The first state did not have a page number, but the last state does. He prints plates of the first state, and the fourth state addresses other anomalies in detail, but never once even mentions the page number correction. Yet on other occasions, he at least minimally documents when proofreading fixed a page number. His repeated justification for paying scant attention to pagination is that the proofreading focused on readability and the pagination simply didn't matter. So here is Tempest Final State version 4. In order to avoid potential copyright infringements, I'll ask you to use your imagination. In your mind, turn the decorative B upside down and remove the number 1 up in the top right-hand corner. Then at the bottom of the page, change the A printing signature to a B. And now in your mind, you've got the first state, upside down B, wrong signature, no page number. Can these really be simple compositor errors, or was something else going on? Reproductions of this page are in the Norton Appendix and also in Hinman's book. So these are all in this error page is in First Folio 24 in the Folio Library, which gives additional description saying that all of the original preliminary pages are missing. But the folio does contain engravings of William Herbert and Philip Herbert. Clearly speculating here, but the oddities of this Tempest First State page 1 and the presence of the Herbert brothers engravings, if they can be proved as original to Folio 24, suggest Folio 24 may have been a presentation copy. At any rate, it's difficult to believe the compositor accidentally put the decorative B upside down and used the wrong printing signature. So I suggest our editors, at least for one impression that managed to survive in Folio 24, were at their games again. So Gabriel Reedy's got an excellent video on YouTube and also a chapter in Strittmatter's book about the folio and the history of fixing. I don't hold out much hope that Folio 24 has any other remaining unique anomalies, but I will be attempting to view a full scan of it at some point in the near future. Now let's shift back to the principal actors again. So just to reiterate, Waugh identified 40 plus 17 equals 57 in the name William Shakespeare. Double V, 20 times 2 equals 40, rather than the W, plus the 17 letters Illiam Shakespeare. And also mentioned earlier, original has the geometric value pointing to Ben Jonson. So in the spreadsheet, I've laid out the actors' initials with the geometric values into columns. Remember that W is a double V geometric 40 for our purposes. That is directly from De Vere. Waugh demonstrated it in De Vere's signature, the name William Shakespeare, and I demonstrated it in the title The Winter's Tale. So as you can see, we've got 3 40, 17 combinations in yellow, and then an additional 5 17s in yellow. On this slide, we've got 2 Ben Jonson signatures in tan. I guess it's orange, sort of looks more like tan. Then we've got 2 St. Albans signatures in green, St. Albans being Francis Bacon, and we've got one John Florio signature in pink. And then in purple, appropriately, we've got signatures for Philip Herbert, William Herbert, and Susan Herbert. And you can also see below Susan Herbert, we have a C, which is not colored, but C for Cecil, because de Vere, Susan was a Vere, but also a Cecil and a Herbert. So here I submit is evidence suggesting that Johnson, Bacon, and Florio were the working editors with the three Herberts as executive editors, so to speak, and not merely the financial patrons of the Folio. Based on other examples of signing throughout the Folio, I do believe Johnson was the lead editor, but I would identify Bacon as probably the grammatricist in chief, based on his well-documented lifelong work with ciphers. Florio's single signature may suggest he had less involvement than Johnson and Bacon, but we know Johnson, Bacon, and Florio were all well acquainted with one another, and William Herbert was a patron of all three around the time of the Folio production, so their involvement at any level should not come as much of a surprise. Laying out the names and numbers on this page, probably the easiest encoding our editors had to do. They could choose almost any names and put them in nearly any order. Surely they needed Shakespeare, Burbage, Kemp, Hemmings, Condell, and Sly, but after that, I would argue our editors had quite a bit of latitude to encode their initials. So on this slide, I've separated the grammatric values into two columns to make it more easy to see what our editors were up to. In purple, you'll see the sequential numbers add up to 57. And though I don't have them colored, the three numbers right below the purple can be converted to 17 across or down by converting that 1 to an I and then to its grammatric 9. In the column colored pink, you can see all the numbers total 51, which is 17 times 3. In the green cells, you can see 1 plus 1 plus 8 plus 7 equals 17. And though not colored, you can also see 9 plus 7 plus 1 equals 17 twice. On the right-hand side, you can see the column in yellow adding up to 57, with the bottom cells in orange adding up to 17. On this slide, I put the grammatric values back into one light blue column, which adds up to 152, which is 15 plus 2 equals 17, and also the first page of Hamlet. This can't all be coincidence, nor can it be reasonably argued that this is the work of Hemmings and Condell. Though thanks to our editors, Hemmings and Condell do contribute their initials to this grammatric tour de force. But let's give Hemmings and Condell possibly a putative role. They truly may have been tasked as hunter-gatherers to track down stray manuscripts, foul papers, and or prompt books not already in the Grand Possessor's possession to bring back for editing. Alexander Waugh, in one of his videos, suggests the theory that the entire first folio may have already been laid out in manuscript by de Vere before de Vere died. If true, then poor Hemmings and Condell don't even have this hunter-gatherer role. Now, back to the catalog page and the histories. So to be fair, Hinman does identify the major pagination anomaly we can see in the histories. Henry IV, Part 2, begins on page 74 and concludes on page 100 with the two unnumbered pages 101 and 102 following. But then the next play, Henry V, begins on page 69 rather than on page 102. Hinman proposes in general that there were some changes in plan along the way and the quires were not printed sequentially. His evidence based on typeface and other anomalies is solid, but for the histories, I question how they could have gone so far astray in the casting off, and how did they somehow coincidentally decide to revert to 69, which is 33 pages off, and also manage to have Henry VI, Part 1 begin on page 96. These are extremely suspicious anomalies. So here we can see 6 examples of 17 in contiguous non-geometric numbers in the histories. There are more, but I think this is enough to show intent. Here are the geometric values added. So in yellow, we can see the left-hand column totals 51, 17 times 3, a number we've already seen in the comedies. In orange, we see the geometric value is 69 over to the right, and in the middle column totals 99. You can flip one of the first 9 over to get 69, or you can take that 9 and split it up into a 3 and a 6 to get 369. And if you think I'm cheating by flipping over a 9, here is the last page of Cymbeline, where I suggest our editors are imploring us to rearrange page 993 to 369 by flipping over 1 9 and then juggling the numbers so that we can have Cymbeline begin on page 369 and end on page 369. So this ends part 1. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And please join me in part 2 as we continue decoding Shakespeare's first folio, starting with the tragedies on the catalog page and then into the plays themselves to see where all these numbers games lead us. Thank you.